Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod, episode number 81. Thank you all so much for joining us again. Once again, it is a big week for Netflix, apparently, because a lot of our topics today are going to be addressing the trailers, the reveals, some of the important information coming out of Tudum. I know it's the opening, I don't know, from the Netflix logo where it shows up. But anyways, it's just hard to say that word, without trying to mimic that sound, but Tudum, whatever. But a lot of the news and segments today will be about that. I know it's been a week and a half or so, but I wanted to talk about the news about Stranger Things Season 5, about Wake Up Dead Man, even about Frankenstein, which looks really interesting, as well as, of course, the other big trailer that came out this week, Wicked for Good. So we'll talk about all of that on today's episode. Guys, if you are watching and listening on YouTube, thank you so much. Make sure to subscribe to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel. But if you are interested also, because the YouTube video version of the podcast comes out usually on Monday or Tuesday, a couple days after the first couple segments have been released. And so if you're interested in hearing the full podcast as soon as it comes out, because I know that the segments come out a little bit later as they're spread out throughout the following week. If you're interested in hearing the podcast in full as soon as it comes out, before any of the segments come out, make sure to hop on over to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Overcast and take a listen there. The podcast is uploaded in full first on the audio-only platform, so if you're interested in that, make sure to check it out over there so you don't have to wait all week for these segments to come out, and make sure to give it a rating if you're listening over there. That will do it for the intro, and let's get into these topics. Alrighty guys, I'm a little late to this, I admit that, but I just finished watching Apple TV Plus's new show, The Studio. And if you've been watching the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel or the podcast for a little while now, you'll know actually I've been a big fan, and it surprised me as well, of these Apple TV Plus shows. It's surprising because a couple years ago, I think it's actually been 4 or 5 years now, when Apple TV announced, or Apple, the company, the iPhone company, the Mac computer company, announced they would be making a streaming service, we all kind of went, what? Really? And since then, Amazon has its Prime Video, and so I guess we just now live in the age where these mega corporations can make these streaming services. It's just part of life now. But aside from all of that, all that corporate stuff, the quality of the shows. I mean, we all kind of went at the announcement. I did, at least. I was like, really? Apple? Well, this can't be that good. And then they announced the list of cast members that had already joined before the service had even launched. They were already filming things. They were getting shows ready for production and things like that, and they launched. And lo and behold, 5 or so years later, and Apple TV Plus has churned out some of the best content I've seen in a long time. Shrinking has become one of my favorite shows of all time, the 2 seasons of Shrinking that we have thus far. Ted Lasso, well, again, I acknowledge and I agree with everyone else that season 3 isn't as good as the other seasons were. I love Ted Lasso, just the optimism of it all. But then again, I mean, if because the warm and fuzzy, that's up my alley. But for those of you who want the more dark or the thrillers, we have Severance. And Severance, I've had some problems with, but overall, the mystery, the water cooler talk, there hasn't been a show that has been such a topic of office and friends and hanging out conversation, water cooler talk, than Severance has in a long, long time. I've also been watching Silo a little bit here and there, trying to catch up with season 1 so that I can finish season 2 as well, which just finished up. And that's been really interesting, although not my favorite show that they've ever done. And now, recently, they released a new show called The Studio. And I made a segment a while ago talking about how I just would beg and implore you, if you have Apple TV Plus or if you have a means to purchase the show or the season on Prime Video or wherever, please go watch Shrinking, because it's just been one of my favorite shows. You can go check out that segment where I talk about all about how it's just become one of my favorite shows. I'm making a similar plea here, but in a different way. If you are, and I'm assuming that most of you guys who are watching the YouTube channel and those of you who are invested in movies and TV shows, most of you are the kind of people that I'm about to talk about. I'm guessing you are. If you are interested in movies, but perhaps don't know the ins and outs of productions and whatnot, and I don't either, but I have a little bit more insight just because I've been following these things for a longer time, I think, than most people. If you are curious about, and it's all satire, so it's not 100% real and whatnot, they're making fun of things, but if you're curious about movies and entertainment and production and even the news outlets that cover them and CinemaCon and things that we talk about all the time, Hollywood Reporter, Variety, media outlets, as well as productions and delays and shootings and pitches and and you want to see how, you know, a look behind the curtain, as well as just laughing and seeing hilarity ensue, please watch the studio. It's I think created by Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, and it's fantastic. I mean, Seth Rogen, Ike Barinholtz, Catherine Hahn, Catherine O'Hara, Bryan Cranston. And so many fun surprises and cameos, but it's so funny. Every episode is a peek behind the curtain of the Hollywood industry. They're not afraid to completely roast themselves. A little ironic because, you know, the people that are making the show are, I mean, these kinds of Hollywood people, you know, the executive producers and the studio heads and whatnot are the ones who greenlit it. So it's a little bit ironic, and it's also a little bit ironic. They make fun of it in the show, not a spoiler, but they make fun of it in the show that, you know, oh, who would ever make a show that's funded by a giant corporation? Well, here we are. So I mean, they're aware of it, and you can take that for what it's worth. But guys, I mean, I really. And I say this, you know, in terms of quality and laughs and whatnot, it's good, and you can make of it what you will. But it's a good show, in my opinion. And most of all, if you're just interested in what it looks like to, you know, what Hollywood kind of looks like, they're not afraid to pull punches in some areas. Now, I'm sure that they're covering up some other things, and they're trying to, you know, whatever, right? That's fine. And when I say covering up, I just mean they're not showing everything, every side of a production and every side of Hollywood. But I still think that this is the most that a TV show or a movie has been, at least in my life and my experience of watching movies and shows. This is the most that I've ever gotten to see behind the curtain in a way that's really funny and satirical. So I would highly, highly, highly recommend you check out the studio. Guys, have you seen it, and what do you think about it? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, continuing on with our Defenders rewatch, and hopefully gonna be all done. Hopefully gonna be all done with the Defenders saga. It's a lot of television. It is a lot of television, but gonna be all done hopefully by the time Daredevil Born Again Season 2 comes out. And if you know what happens at the end of Daredevil Born Again Season 1, and if you've seen the news recently that we talked about with a certain other member of the Defenders saga coming to join Matt Murdock, then you'll know why we're doing this. So this is a fun thing I've been doing in the background of trying to watch all the TV shows. For some context here, we talked about Jessica Jones Season 1 last week, and I might have mentioned it there, but just to give more context in case you're new and you're joining us for the first time, in which case, welcome. Thank you so much for joining the Access Blockbusters crew. But anyways, I originally watched the Daredevil series, not when it came out, but I think right after Season 3 had finished up. So I watched Daredevil Season 1, 2, and then I went to Defenders, and then I watched Season 3. And that's what I did around 2019 is when I did that. And I tried, because I knew that there were other shows. Obviously, watching the Defenders, I knew there were other shows. And so I tried a couple of the other ones. For example, I tried the first episode of Jessica Jones. And again, if you want to hear my thoughts on Jessica Jones Season 1, which I watched for the first time recently, I finished up for the first time recently, you can go check out that segment from last week. And the first time I watched the first episode of Jessica Jones, I just wasn't into it that much. And, you know, while I think Jessica Jones Season 1 wasn't my favorite thing I've seen, I definitely am a little bit more on board with it. I liked it, but not nearly as much as Daredevil. So there was that. But in any case, the next show up after Jessica Jones Season 1 is Daredevil Season 2. And the reason that I'm able to do this so quickly after talking about Jessica Jones Season 1 is because I had actually started watching Daredevil Season 2 right after Daredevil Season 1, and then I thought, well, maybe I should take a step back and watch Jessica Jones Season 1. And so, you know, I had already made some progress with Season 2, and then I picked it up right after I finished Jessica Jones. That's one reason. The other reason, though, and I think this is more important in revisiting the show and in revisiting this season, is that this show was so captivating. This season of television this show in general, Daredevil, is so hooking and so captivating that it made me, I just churned through episodes. Unlike Jessica Jones, where Jessica Jones, I was like, yeah, you know, each episode is fine, and you know, I'm going through it, and I'm enjoying it, and whatnot, but, you know, it was more like one a day, one every other day. Daredevil, I mean, there were times when I was like, I just gotta watch the next thing, because I need to know what happens next. Now, we'll talk about the ways in which Season 2 improves upon and perhaps doesn't improve upon Season 1, but this is going to be a revisiting of Daredevil Season 2. I have already seen it, and this is my rewatch. So, again, if you haven't seen Daredevil Season 2, I would highly recommend it, but we're going to be talking about a lot of the plot details and things like that, so this is a spoiler warning for the show. Now, it's interesting because for those of you who have any insight into the background of these Netflix television shows, which are, I guess, technically now canon in the MCU, although they weren't produced by Marvel Studios technically, but they were being produced in conjunction with the MCU. And actually, there are a lot of references still to the incident. So there's a lot of reference to 2012 New York, the Battle of New York. in these shows. So it's not too hard to connect these with the wider MCU these days anymore. Anyways, the reason I bring this up though is it's so funny to me how similarly the beginning of the Defenders saga parallels the beginning of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. What I mean by this is that you have your iconic character starting out, and it's a risk to start out with characters like Iron Man or Daredevil. They're not your Batmans, they're not your Spider-Mans, they're not your Supermans, right? It was a risk, and it seems ludicrous at the time, or right now, to say that Iron Man was a risk, but it was a risk, and Daredevil too. And so you start out with these characters. They have phenomenal first outings, Iron Man 1 and Daredevil Season 1. You start out with another series, and I guess this is where it differs a little bit. I personally still think Incredible Hulk is my least favorite MCU movie, still to this day. I like Jessica Jones. It just wasn't as good, but you start out with another character, you make another film with another character, but then you jump right back into the original thing. And what's so interesting is that to me, the parallels don't stop there. The way that I have been thinking about this is, let's kind of, use the analogy of a Jenga tower, right? For Iron Man 1 and Daredevil Season 1, rock solid. It's not going to fall. Everything looks good, and it's so sturdy, and everything is totally fine, sturdy as can be. Season 2 of Daredevil, or Iron Man 2 and Season 2 of Daredevil, it's like this. To me, Iron Man 2 is still enjoyable. So the tower is still standing by the time it's all said and done, but it's wobbling because they tried too hard to pull out too many structurally integral bricks and whatnot. Maybe we can use even the analogy of spinning plates as well. They just tried to stack too many plates on top of one another. They tried to be a little bit too ambitious to set up the next move, which was obviously the Avengers, and in this case it's the Defenders. And Iron Man 2 for me, it's one of the lower ranked MCU movies, not because I don't like it necessarily, but because it's, it feels like it's suffering under its own weight, and it's really messy, but it's okay enough because of Robert Downey Jr. Daredevil Season 2, I think, actually suffers from a similar problem. Now, I like Daredevil Season 2 a lot more than I do Iron Man 2. Like I said before, there's a reason I kept going and going and going, because each episode, the way that they ended each episode was captivating, and they had me on the edge of my seat for most of it, with the Hand and with the Yakuza and with Frank Castle as Punisher, and when Wilson Fisk returned. I loved all that stuff. It was great. But it started to become apparent that it was starting to sag under its own weight at a certain point, and it was setting up more things that were going to happen in the next season. How many times have we seen this before? Spider-Man 3, for example, or The Amazing Spider-Man 2, where you're going, yes, but let's try to introduce the Sinister Six, or let's have Venom and Sandman and New Goblin in all in one film. And it's interesting because for those movies, I think that those individual aspects were okay enough, were good enough. But they still weren't like, oh, I'm so on board with this. I'm so on board with every single individual element. Like for Spider-Man 3, I loved a lot of what they did with Sandman. But for the most part, the rest of it was just okay. Like the stuff with Harry and Peter was just so underdeveloped to me, and the stuff with Venom was just so underdeveloped to me. For me, Daredevil Season 2, and I promise this is all relevant, has two very conflicting, competing storylines. The only thing that really connects the two is perhaps Matt's the need for Matt Murdock to try to balance out his life and try to figure out what's important to him, I guess, with the Frank Castle stuff and with the Elektra stuff. But these two storylines, and I'm not saying that a TV show can't have multiple main storylines going on, but as the show was going on, it had been a long time. It had been a long time since I'd seen Season 2. So I was also relearning a lot of these things as well. I was like, who's the blacksmith? I totally forgot it was the Colonel, right? Until the very end. And one of the interesting things was, as the season was winding down, I was going, are these things going to connect at all? And by the time you get to the rooftop battle in the finale, Frank Castle is just standing up there. And I thought, oh, maybe I forgot that he saves Matt or something like that. There's something there. He just kind of looks over and he's like, okay, see you later, Red. And he disappears. And to me, both a good thing and also incredibly frustrating about Daredevil Season 2 is that both storylines, Elektra and Matt, and the Hand, I suppose, and Frank Castle and Matt Murdock are incredibly well done. It's just that they both took up space in one season, whereas I think that they could have easily been their own seasons. And obviously it's very clear with the Elektra stuff that they're doing that because they were setting her up for the Defenders. I obviously remember that. And if you haven't seen the Defenders, I apologize. That's maybe a spoiler for what happens with that. But it's very clear that they're trying to set up something. Obviously, even the last shots of this movie are setting up the Defenders, right? And when Stick shows up towards the middle of the season, I was kind of like, this is kind of feeling like, all set up and not really, it doesn't feel like it's carrying its own weight. But by the time we get to the finale, before the rooftop fight, the conversation that Matt and Elektra have, I love. Because Matt says to Elektra, there's something about us that is different. There's something about you that makes me different. And you can see that tangibly in these two characters. And I love that dynamic. I know some people, I've heard some people have differing opinions on Elektra in Defenders. I love Elodie Young's version of Elektra. I think that she's fantastic as this character. And I'm bummed that she dies in this season, and obviously she kind of comes back as a zombie character in Defenders. I hope that she eventually could come back, although it seems like with the MCU now making Daredevil canon, that's not really going to happen anymore. But I loved that. I love that by the end of the season, you understand why Elektra is sort of the other half of Matt Murdock. She is the good in Matt Murdock, but she's also the darker side as well. And I love their chemistry. So all that, great. On the other side, right? The beginning of this series, Frank Castle, the trial. I love the legal stuff with the trial. It's amazing. But then that storyline has to give way for the Yakuza and for the Hand, and it fizzles out at the end. By the time, because I was really curious about who's the blacksmith, what's going on here. And by the time we get to that, and it's revealed to be the Colonel, I was like, that's disappointing. Not because I wanted it to be some big character. Like, I didn't want the blacksmith to be, I don't know, what's a big character? Maybe Bullseye or Wilson Fisk himself was the blacksmith. Like, I didn't necessarily need that, per se. I wasn't looking for a big, it was Doctor Doom this whole time, was the blacksmith, and he's gonna, nothing like that, right? But it just felt like that storyline had been given such little space to breathe that by the time you get to that reveal at the end, it's like, oh, well, okay, I guess so. And, I like having Karen have a more active role in that subplot as well. It just feels like the only way to connect these two things, like I said earlier, was that, oh yes, Matt has to juggle his different sides of his life. And I mean, sure, we've seen that before. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a little disappointing. Because again, to me, what makes this season still really good is that everything they did do was captivating, and it was engrossing, and it was tense, and it was filled with stakes. And they made ninjas in Daredevil really good and really feel realistic, right? At least to me, at least. I know some people maybe don't think that, but to me, they did. It's just that the balancing act, it's the tower is still standing, but it's maybe teetering a little bit more than I would have liked to. Other characters, like, I liked what Foggy was up to and kind of asserting his own independence, and, cameo by Hogarth, that now means a lot more to me than it did before. Other things, Karen obviously taking a bigger role at the newspaper. There are a lot of great things in this episode, or in this season. And I like that Matt reveals that he's Daredevil to Karen. It feels like this is about time. If they had, I forgot when they did that. So when I was rewatching this, I was like, surely they don't say this until season 3 after he quote unquote dies and then comes back. Surely not. And it turns out that that's true. Yep, that's true that he reveals it at the very end, although the timing of that feels a little strange. So again, I mean, this episode or this season feels like it contains 2 separate full seasons, and they tried their best to put them into one, and they kind of failed. But failed doesn't mean that they made a bad season. It just means that it could have been, I think, a little bit better if they had just separated these 2 things out. That being said, I love this show. I love these characters, and I know that people think that season 2 is the weakest one. I would probably agree based on what I remember from season 3. We'll get to season 3 in a little bit. Lot of seasons of television to get through before we get there. But I think that everything that they did do in this season individually was great. So, guys, what did you think when you saw Daredevil season 2 for the first time? What did you think about it? Have you seen it recently? And what stands out to you about Daredevil season 2? Is it Punisher? Is it Frank Castle? Or is it Elektra? The Hand? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys. Well, this was a little bit of a surprise to me. I knew of this movie. I knew that Guillermo del Toro was going to be making a Frankenstein movie. And, I'd seen the picture of Oscar Isaac as Victor Frankenstein, the one who creates Frankenstein's monster. That's the, misconception, the classic misconception of everyone thinks it's Frankenstein is the monster. Although, this movie, based on the trailer, might be playing with that idea a little bit of who is really the monster, the creator or the created. But, everyone thinks that the monster itself is Frankenstein, but Victor Frankenstein is the human being. Anyways, I knew that this movie was coming out. I knew Oscar Isaac was going to be in it and whatnot. But I didn't quite realize that Netflix was going to be the one producing it and all that. So at the Tudum event, I wasn't watching the event live, but afterwards I went through and I was looking through all the trailers and I was like, oh, Stranger Things, of course I have to talk about Stranger Things and Wake Up Dead Man and Squid Game Season 3. Oh, Frankenstein. Let me check out this trailer and just see what's up. I watched the trailer and I thought, I got to talk about this. This movie looks awesome. And what's so interesting to me is that we've gotten so many adaptations in modern times. Because I know in the in the 20th century, in the 1900s, there were many, many adaptations of Frankenstein and The Bride of Frankenstein and whatnot. And, most of them, I would think, I haven't seen all of them, but I think most of them in recent times are skewing a little less, a little away from the books, right? The book itself, the Mary Shelley book of Frankenstein, and more towards the supernatural. And I mean, it is supernatural, but more towards the, fiction side of it and making things, tangential and subplots. And I think I could be wrong. It's been a long time since I read the original Frankenstein, but The Bride of Frankenstein was a creation for film, I think. Don't quote me on that. But anyways, I think that these movies also, like with vampires and Dracula, you can tell all these sorts of tangential stories with them and based on the IP and the character. So I watched this trailer and I was thinking, is this just going to be another case of, it's going to be sort of a loose adaptation of the book? And I watched it. Again, it's been, I want to say almost 10 years since I've read the book, but I did remember reading the book. This looks like a very faithful adaptation to me of the book. And I think that that's somehow, in some way, a little refreshing, actually. That somebody, Guillermo del Toro, who is as skilled of a filmmaker as he is with The Shape of Water and Pan's Labyrinth, that's, as they alluded to in the trailer, is taking a stab at what it looks like making a very faithful book adaptation. One of the keys to this, that makes me think this, is that if you have read the book, you know that the book is sort of a frame story. It's people telling the story within the story, basically. That's what a frame story is, where you have, like, let me tell you the story of. And I think it's from Victor Frankenstein's perspective, although I think the monster has some parts in it where the monster is talking as well. I think. Again, it's been a long time. But the reason that I think that this trailer is alluding towards a more faithful adaptation is that there are parts, I think, from the book where you see Oscar Isaac's Victor Frankenstein is like, let me tell you what happened and whatnot. And I think that it's one of those frame stories where Victor Frankenstein is towards the end, right? And he's recounting everything that happened before. And then I think some things happen after his retelling. So I think that based on that, it looks really interesting. And it looks like a more true adaptation of the Mary Shelley book. On top of that, Oscar Isaac looks fantastic in this role. I'm not going to say awards buzz because I haven't even seen the movie, but this looks like a role that he could really sink his teeth into, is what I will say, which I think is a really awesome thing. And then, also, I think that the visual style is really gritty and grounded, and I think that it just feels tangible, right? We're talking about nature here, the idea of nature and creation and whatnot. And the laboratory looks really great. I love the color palette as well, being a little bit more muted in certain places. Speaking of, Wake Up Dead Man, a little bit more gothic in a certain sense. I kind of thought this was going to happen when the monster showed up after the title, and I was like, we're not really going to see his face, are we? Because I think that's what we're most curious about. There's the iconic image of Frankenstein, that from the original movie in the 1900s that everyone is very familiar with, I think. That's sort of the classic Frankenstein of if you dress up as Frankenstein or Halloween, you have the screws, I think, on the side of your head. So I'm very curious to see what this iteration of Frankenstein looks like, because I think that that's something that's kind of important for this character, of the look, nailing the look and making it iconic in its own sense. So I'm very interested in that. But I wanted to talk about this trailer because I think that sneakily, all of a sudden, this movie has become, I think, a little bit more anticipated for me. I'm quite excited to see what this iteration of Frankenstein turns into, and I hope you guys are as well. So guys, did you watch the trailer for Oscar Isaac and Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, and what did you think about it? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, last week we talked about the little teaser that they posted on social media that seemed to indicate that Knives Out 3 Wake Up Dead Man was going to be released on December 12th, 2025. And I said in the segment, and I was right, that this is probably going to be outdated very, very quickly. I had totally forgotten that Tudum, the Netflix event that they do, was coming, or was going to happen just a few days later. So I should have known that they were going to announce this officially, but we had all speculated, and we were all correct, that the Proverbs 12:12 reference that they were teasing is indeed a reference to the release date. And lo and behold, Netflix at their Tudum event has officially confirmed that Wake Up Dead Man is going to be released on December 12th. Now, they also, and it's not a full trailer, I would even hardly call it a teaser, but it is something to talk about, because if it was just a series of words and images and whatnot, I don't know if I would want to talk about it. But there are a couple things here in this first little teaser for Wake Up Dead Man that I think is really fun. First of all, always great to see Daniel Craig back as Benoit Blanc. He has become one of my favorite recent modern characters in movies. I just love the accent. I love how he's hamming it up in a way that feels genuine, in a weird sense. Like, this feels like a real character while still feeling like a caricature of a, not a spy, but a detective and a murder mystery solver. I love him as this character. I love also the font that they used to announce the full cast, which we already knew of: Kaylee Spaney, Jeremy Renner, Josh Brolin, Glenn Close, Mila Kunis. So many great actors joining this cast, and I think that that's awesome. The other interesting thing, though, is that so Wake Up Dead Man, right? That's an interesting title. I mean, we didn't know what Glass Onion meant. We really didn't know. I remember watching a couple trailers for Glass Onion, and I was like, okay, so there's a building. That's the Glass Onion. Okay. And we didn't really know. Wake Up Dead Man is interesting because, and it's also interesting to allude to a Bible verse as well, because from this trailer, and this is again, my speculation, this is why I wanted to talk about this and hear your guys' thoughts as well. It seems like there's this interesting sort of resurrection plot going on here. Wake Up Dead Man. Like, it's one of those classic things where not everything is as it seems, right? In Sherlock Holmes, if you've read them, I love Sherlock Holmes stories. I've read them so many times over. They're the best. Conan Doyle, one of my favorite authors of all time. But, one of the big, it's not a trope, but one of the big plot devices that they use a lot of the times is, something is mystical and something strange is happening, and then it's not really as it seems, and there's a very rational explanation for it. Because, the Knives Out universe is not one of those murder mystery universes that seems to be dabbling in the supernatural, and I kind of like it staying there, which is, I think it's a good thing. So again, it looks like it's staying very real, and you see from this teaser the very limited lines that Benoit Blanc has, where he's like, some may say that, I forget exactly what the line is, but there's some allusion to someone, rising from the dead or waking up or whatever or whatnot. And he says, but I see this as a good old-fashioned murder, and I like to solve murders. And I think this is a super interesting angle, right? Like, what if, it's another trope, but it's, like, in the first movie, I think what was so brilliant about it was the classic, the estate kind of murder where, someone has money to get from this and the estate and whatnot. And the second one is about a rich billionaire who is trying to scheme his way out of, he's trying to take credit for something that wasn't his. And this one, I think, is going to be a little bit more gothic, maybe a little bit darker. And not darker in the sense of tone, but just darker in the sense of setting. There's a pastor, I think. There's a reverend I saw from the cast list as well, which I think is super interesting. I think played by Josh O'Connor. I could be wrong. And I think that what's so interesting about this is that it could take on a more gothic, 18th century Sherlock Holmes kind of vibe, where somebody maybe miraculously rises from the dead and then starts to do something. Or I don't know. Maybe that's what they're trying to do. Maybe it's cultish. I think that you can get a lot of that tonality from this trailer, and it's, again, very, very short trailer where we're going to probably wait a while, probably 3 or 4 months until we get a full trailer for this. But still, I'm just so excited. I love this franchise. If Daniel Craig wants to just keep making these movies, I hope it's not too hard for him, because I would love if a Knives Out movie comes out every 2 years or every 3 years, and Daniel Craig can just film them for 6 weeks or 8 weeks and then just be, make the movies. I know it's not that easy. But I would absolutely love that. So I'm really excited. Wake Up Dead Man. We are even closer to a release date, or not to a release date, to the release date of December 12th, and I can't wait for it. Guys, what did you think about that first teaser for Wake Up Dead Man? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, continuing on with Trailer Palooza, we have another trailer for a TV show, but this time it's not for Netflix, because, from the Netflix Tudum event, we got tons and tons of trailers that we're talking about in today's episode, but sneakily around the same time, Amazon Prime Video decided to drop a trailer for a show I didn't even know was going to come out this year, Gen V Season 2. Now, Gen V is the spin-off show for The Boys. It very much takes place in the same universe, same continuity, same timeline, etc., but it takes place at Godolphin University, so kind of a college for superheroes, for soups, and it follows a completely different cast of characters, though there have been some surprises and some fun cameos. We are going to be talking about this trailer. Those of you who haven't seen The Boys or Gen V, I tend to keep the tone and the format here very family friendly, even though we talk about shows like Daredevil and Punisher and things like that that can get a little bit more violent, and Gen V and The Boys is certainly in that category of being a little bit more on the harder edged side. So if you haven't seen it, no worries, but we're here to talk about this trailer. And again, I'm not usually a big fan of the violence or the gore or whatnot, or the really sort of R-rated things. I'm generally not a big fan of it, but really what I love about The Boys universe and Gen V is the storytelling. The storytelling is so sharp. The satire is usually very pointed and usually very apt for the time that we're living in. And I think that that's a great thing to see, just really well done satire these days. Now, season 4 got very crazy, and I like season 4, but I think that season 5 was really where they had their sights, and I think the whole Homelander and Butcher showdown that's about to happen is going to be crazy. But let's talk about Gen V. So Gen V, I really liked that it was a little bit of a break from the Boys timeline itself, although it took place in the universe. It was very smart and sharp. And while season 1 was very much the let's imagine if college kids were superheroes and were being trained in this messed up crazy universe, but it's still college and it's still crazy. Season 2, because based on what happened at the end of season 1, spoilers for that and for The Boys season 4, this world is completely taken over by Homelander at this point. And also those superheroes, those students led by Marie, and we have Jordan. I just looked up the cast list again because, to be honest, I forgot a lot of the characters' names. But now, once I saw them, they were all coming back to me. So we have your Marie's and Emma's and Jordans of the world that are that fought back, and we also had, very sadly, Andre, who was Polarity, I believe was the superhero name, and the actor who played him very tragically passed away. And it looks like they opted to write that into the story based on the trailer, which I think is a very, we'll see how it works out. But I think it's always an interesting move rather than recasting. But it was very tragic that actor passed away, I think right before they were going to start writing or producing season 2 of Gen V. But otherwise, like I said, if season 1 was sort of the, hey, let's imagine if college had superheroes, season 2 is, okay, now let's imagine if this college was basically a prison, a training grounds, a brutal training grounds for creating young soldiers, basically, for the superhero Homelander universe. I'm very curious because season 1 ended on such a cliffhanger with all of them being blasted by Homelander, and then waking up in this weird prison. So I'm going to be very curious to see how they explain this at the beginning of this season. It doesn't look like it really did a whole lot, which I'm usually not a big fan of when first seasons or seasons end on huge cliffhangers and then they don't really, like, it's next season, it just gets wiped out. I'm not a big fan of it because it's like, oh, you made us wait all that time and then you're just going to write it away. I don't know what they're going to do, so we'll see. Maybe it's a big part of the first couple episodes and we just don't see that in this trailer. Perhaps that's so. But the other interesting thing, this season's coming out September 17th, so it's coming out much sooner than we thought. Season 5 of The Boys, I think, is wrapping up soon, filming-wise, and I think that will probably come out early to mid-2026. So in the meantime, I'm very glad to be heading back into the world of The Boys. Now, I don't know if this show will continue past Season 5, because Season 5 of The Boys looks like it's going to be pretty definitive. I mean, Homelander or Butcher, it looks like they're going to die one way or the other, and Homelander is probably going to get taken down, so we'll see. And we'll see what the world of The Boys looks like post season 5, because that probably impacts whether or not Gen V gets a season 3. Because while I think Eric Kripke, who's the showrunner of these shows, says that it shouldn't be required that you watch one to know the other for The Boys and Gen V, they still take place in the same continuity. So we'll see what that entails. And case in point, we see a little bit of Firecracker in this season, in this trailer as well. So we'll see. But I'm excited to get back into the world of The Boys and see how things are in the post season 4 Homelander takeover universe. We'll see how that goes. Guys, let me know what you thought about the trailer for the second season of Gen V in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, so one of the biggest events every single year, and we love to cover it here on the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel. In fact, last year's San Diego Comic-Con, which is the event I'm alluding to, last year's San Diego Comic-Con was when we found out Robert Downey Jr., none other than Iron Man himself, would be returning to the MCU, but not as Iron Man, as Dr. Doom. And that was really exciting. We covered all of that on the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel. Now, this year, it has been seemingly confirmed that DC will have a big presence at San Diego Comic-Con, which makes total sense, by the way. They're launching their cinematic universe. Superman will have just come out. They're going to be riding that momentum. I'm sure they're going to be trying to unveil looks at Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. They're going to try to reveal some looks at Clayface as well. And I would imagine James Gunn will take that opportunity to start talking about the future of his DCU slate. And, Marvel has been a mainstay right? Marvel has been a mainstay at Comic-Con. They have missed a year here or there and pandemics and whatnot, but overall, they've been a mainstay for San Diego Comic-Con. However, it looks like, according to a report from The Hollywood Reporter, this year could be different. It looks like Marvel is skipping San Diego Comic-Con. And I'm here to tell you why, in my opinion, that makes complete sense. And look, nobody is more disappointed that Marvel wouldn't be attending a Comic-Con than me, because I think that regardless of what happens to the projects that Marvel announces, whether they're good, whether they're bad, whether they even end up coming out. Blade, remember Blade? And everyone got a free Blade hat at San Diego Comic-Con one year. I think this was 2019, I want to say, right after Endgame, and everyone was so excited and whatnot, and Blade still hasn't come out. It's going to be well past 2027 until Blade even gets made, if it ever does. So, you know, things happen, right? But regardless of that, I mean, just the excitement of Comic-Con and the excitement of hearing all these announcements, of Kevin Feige getting on stage and being like, this is Phase 6, is so exciting. And does part of me wish that Kevin Feige gets on stage and says, this is Phase 7, this is the Mutant Saga, here's your X-Men film, here is the cast? Of course. Of course I'd be excited for that. But here's the thing. This isn't the year for that. Because with everything going on with the delays of these films, and with Spider-Man Brand New Day now being the next MCU film after Fantastic Four First Steps, which is coming out in July, and it looks like, based on these reports, that there is some validity to the test screenings, that there was, in fact, a surprise test screening, which usually I don't talk about because test screenings are usually hidden in such secrecy. So, and again, even if I did want to talk about the test screenings, I mean, it's still 2 months away. So even if everyone's like, it's terrible, I mean, there's still time, right? There's still time to fix the movie. Obviously not to reshoot the entire movie, but, you know, I just, at this point, I'm like, it is what it is. So that's why we're not really talking about those test screenings. And I haven't even, you know, looked at the alleged post-credit scene leak. So all those things are things that we usually don't cover on the YouTube channel. But, you know, the timing of it all, going back to San Diego Comic-Con, is that this is all this stuff that we're talking about, right? Phase 7, 8, 9, and the X-Men and the Mutant Saga is a 2027 thing, honestly. Because Marvel is taking their time. Avengers Doomsday is coming out December 2026. Avengers Secret Wars, which is going to end the multiverse saga, is coming out in December 2027. And that's it. And so, you know, honestly, the time to start announcing these things is 2027 San Diego Comic-Con, because 2026 San Diego Comic-Con is going to be all things Doomsday. You can bet it's going to be all things Doomsday. And probably I think there's a February or May 2027 release, so it's going to be that, and it's going to be Doomsday, and it's going to be Secret Wars. There's nothing to talk about right now. I don't want a teaser for Doomsday if they're going to rush it out there, because the film is going to be, it's like 16, 17 months away from this year's Comic-Con. It doesn't make sense. And so while, again, I'm as disappointed as anyone else, the last time Kevin Feige got on stage and started announcing projects, I mean, half those things didn't happen. And not half, but a few of those things didn't happen. The whole thing got flipped. Remember Kang Dynasty? Like, it feels like every time Marvel has gotten on stage these days, I mean, sure, we get excited about these announcements and we talk about them. And so far, Robert Downey Jr. is still Doctor Doom. But ultimately, they don't pan out as well as we thought they would. And I'd much rather have them, you know, focus on the product, focus on a complete thing, and then come out with it and have everything be lined up, ready to go. Remember when they would announce these things? Remember when Kevin Feige announced the entire Phase 3 slate, and all but one movie from that slate got released. And only one more got added, I believe, other than the Spider-Man films, which they usually don't talk about at these Comic-Con events, or these kind of announcement events. But all but one of those films, which was Inhumans, got released, and only one got added, which was Ant-Man and the Wasp. So it's, you know, that's not where the MCU is right now, and I just feel like this is not the year. Again, I'm bummed about it, but this is not the year. So, guys, what do you think about the reports that Marvel is not going to be attending Comic-Con this year? Are you disappointed, or do you think it's the right move? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys. Well, Squid Game Season 2 just came out. 6 months ago? No, 5 months ago. And guess what? We have a new season of Squid Game coming out in just under a month. And that's because, spoiler alert for Season 2, Season 2 really wasn't a full season. It was part 1 of a full season, and Season 3 is going to be part 2 of that season of television. And so we have our first trailer. Honestly, I am a little surprised that this trailer is coming out so late. I would have thought that almost immediately, I mean, sure that there, you know, people would have known or maybe guessed by the end of Season 2 that, oh, this isn't a full season, but maybe you didn't know. Maybe you would have thought, oh, well, this isn't a full season, then that's disappointing, and so we're going to have to wait 2 years for Season 3. I don't know what people would have thought, because there was no marketing. There was no trailer for this until the Totem event at Netflix, which is, again, this season of television. This is the first trailer for Squid Game Season 3, and probably the only trailer, unless they release one in 2 weeks, which is crazy. I don't know why they do that. But I would guess this is the only trailer for Squid Game Season 3, and it's coming out in 3.5 weeks. So it's kind of crazy that how short the timeline is. Anyways, all that aside, let's talk about the trailer itself. It's pretty short, relatively speaking, and here's the thing about this. I've been thinking about it, and I was like, okay, so what if, right, Season 3, you look at it and you go, oh, because there's a world in which I watch the trailer, we all watch the trailer, and we go, oh, interesting. I understand why they had to split Season 2 and Season 3. That makes total sense. But then I watch the trailer, and I go, I am baffled by this decision to split Season 2 and Season 3, because everything that we see in this trailer for Season 3, again, looks great. The games look intense again. There's a game where they're jumping over a rope and whatnot. And I also love that there's a confrontation at the end between Gi-hoon and the frontman, right? And I think that that's really cool as well. But, all the side characters that survive Season 2 are still hanging around there. Great. All of that. Really, really good. Really good. But everything in this trailer, to me, indicates that this is just the second half of Season 2. And it makes me even more frustrated that they had to do this. I get it, there were only 6 months in between the seasons. Why did you have to brand it as 2 different seasons? It's just a weird marketing ploy. Because now, I feel like in good conscience, I can't really talk about Squid Game Season 2 in the way that I did, or I did a review of it, because Season 3, it's so heavily contingent on what happens with Season 3. And it's weird. It's just strange to me because everything in Season 3 seems to indicate the games will continue. They put down, they stopped the rebellion in a sense. And so, that's all done. And so the players will have to head back. There's going to be more voting. It just looks like everything is a continuation of what was going on in Season 2. And it's all going to lead to a confrontation between Gi-hoon and the frontman, where he realizes that was the player 1, right? That he's been playing with this whole time. Again, I mean, I'm sitting here saying, everything in the trailer looks really good, and I'm really excited about it because for my frustrations with Season 2 being just basically half the season, I still enjoyed Season 2. But it's just odd because there was nothing in the trailer for Season 3, which Season 3 is coming out June 27th, I believe. There was nothing in the trailer for Season 3 that made me go, oh, I get it, right? Because Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, for example, I mean, those 2 films could not have been one film. And I get that there's a time thing and whatnot, and you don't want to make a 4-hour movie. This is television, by the way, so I think that the analogy is a little bit different because you could make more episodes of a television season, right? You don't have to limit yourself to 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever. You really can't make a 4-hour movie. But length aside, right? Length aside, Avengers Infinity War is one story. Avengers Endgame is another story. Maybe you could have had the prologue to Avengers Endgame as part of the end of Avengers Infinity War. I don't know, maybe. But regardless, you can't just smush those 2 things together. You watch Avengers Endgame and you go, oh, yes, this is a completely different story. That's why they decided not to call it Infinity War Part 2, because it was not Infinity War Part 2. It was something else entirely. And again, none of us have seen Squid Game Season 3, so we don't know, but everything from this trailer just looks like it's the continuation of Season 2. So we'll see how it goes, and then we'll talk about it once we have seen the full season. Guys, what did you think of the trailer, the first trailer for Squid Game Season 3? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, I've been waiting for this moment for, well, a long, long time. Stranger Things is one of my favorite shows of all time. Who knows if it's because it was one of the first shows I really fell in love with. That's possible. But I really think, and I've seen the show now, again, 3-4 times, because every time a new season comes out, I rewatch the whole thing in preparation, and gosh, I might have to do that in November to get ready. Maybe even October. There's so much content to get through. Anyways, I love the show. I really think it holds up. I know some people don't love the 3rd season and whatnot, and that's fine. I think the 3rd season is really fun. The one where it's sort of the summer camp vibe. I really like it, but, I understand why people don't love it as much. Anyways, Season 4 came out. Season 4 came out already 2022, so it's been a while. We talked about Season 4 on the YouTube channel a long time ago, almost 3 years ago now. And I loved it. I mean, I loved also how there were just a couple episodes where the Duffer Brothers, the creators and the executive producers of the show, and the directors of some of the episodes, I believe, were like, yeah, let's just make 2-hour episodes. Why not? Who cares? And, Stranger Things is Netflix's crown jewel. So why not? Who cares? Let's just do it. And from what we've been told, we reported on this as well, the episodes for Stranger Things Season 5 are basically all going to be 2 hours long, which is crazy, but I love it. I love it. I've been looking forward to this. I am not ready to say goodbye. it's crazy, you know, they put so much time and effort into these things, and it's just kind of shocking how long it takes to make these seasons, because I would have loved to have had Stranger Things seasons for, you know, every year, every 2 years, whatnot. But at this pace, we've been waiting almost every 4 years, basically, between seasons. But Stranger Things Season 5 was confirmed to be coming out in 2025. And now, at Netflix's Tudum event, we've gotten confirmation, as well as a couple shots. I'm not even going to call it a teaser trailer, because nothing's revealed in it at all. But we've gotten a couple shots in a, you know, what you could call a teaser. And we'll talk about that at the end of the segment. But more significantly than that, we have the release dates for Stranger Things Season 5. Volume 1, and we don't know at this point how many episodes Volume 1 is going to include. I believe the season is going to be 9 episodes. I could be wrong about that. Maybe 8. I think 8 episodes. So Volume 1 is coming out November 26th. I believe this is Thanksgiving Day, which is really exciting. Really, really exciting. Volume 2 is going to be coming out on Christmas Day. I think Christmas Day. Yes, Christmas Day. And then the finale, which I don't know, maybe the finale is going to be 3 hours long, is going to be coming out on New Year's Eve. This is so exciting. And first of all, I love that they're really digging into the holidays here. So Thanksgiving, spend time with your family or watch Stranger Things. Christmas Day, spend time with your family or watch Stranger Things. New Year's Eve, spend time with your loved ones or watch Stranger Things. Try to do both, but you know, I love that they're like, hey, we know you've been waiting. The season's going to be there for you. So I am really, really excited about this. I cannot wait. I just cannot wait. We're going to try. It's going to be really hard, especially with I'm going to be with family. And it's going to be really hard to get, you know, to watch all the episodes in Volume 1 during Thanksgiving and then get the review out the next week for the next week's episode. But we'll try. We'll try to get it out as soon as we can to talk about Volume 1 of Stranger Things Season 5. And then, you know, Christmas, same thing with Christmas and New Year's. But again, we'll definitely try because this show has been amazing to me. I'm also going to try to rewatch the whole thing beforehand. I don't know if I can. I don't know if I will be able to, but I'm just looking forward to this. I'm not ready for the emotions that are going to come out of this season. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be wild, and I can't wait. So as for the visuals that we see in this little teaser trailer, not too much. The one thing I can take away, so we see Steve, we see Dustin, we see that Max is still in a coma with Lucas hanging around there as well, and then we see a shot with Mike, with Finn Wolfhard's Mike, and then we see Mike's mom, I think, and his sister as well. I think Nancy and Jonathan are there as well. And so just shots of the characters, right? None of them look particularly different. Obviously, we see Eleven and Hopper, but, you know, they all look kind of the same, even though there's been a sort of a time jump from what we understand from the last season, which is interesting, right? I've talked about the fact that it's interesting there's going to be a time jump because of the giant cliffhanger at the end of season 4, but we'll see. We'll see how that's resolved. And we end all of this on a shot of Will screaming run, which, you know, is a little bit out of context. It looks a little silly, honestly. But that being said, one of the interesting things that I take away from this is that we are heading back to our roots. We start out this teaser with Winona Ryder's character Joyce talking about how she's, you know, thought about that night when it all started, when Will was taken into the Upside Down. And I don't think it's a coincidence that we're bookending this trailer with a shot of Will screaming, because I think that this trailer indicates something that I've been thinking about for a while, something that a lot of people have been thinking about for a while, that this season is going to be very Will-centric again. And I think that's a really good thing. It's going to be a full circle moment for this show. And I think that Will has been a little bit underutilized. I think that, you know, it was interesting to have him, have feelings for Mike throughout the last season, although I don't know if Mike was the right character to be quite honest with you, because I mean the whole show it's been Mike and Elle, and so I don't know where we're gonna go. Is it just gonna stay unrequited feelings, or is Will gonna find love? Who knows? But anyways, all that aside, it started with Will, and I think that residual trauma, or even if maybe Vecna can possess him or whatnot, I don't know. But I think it's a really good thing to bookend the entire show. So I'm excited. I cannot wait, and I hope that we get a full trailer sometime in the near future. Guys, what do you think about this first little teaser and also the release date strategy for Stranger Things Season 5? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, think about this. Just take a second here and think about this. In 2 months, most of us watching, you know, on this YouTube channel, on the Access Blockbusters pod on the YouTube channel, and myself included, most of us will have seen both the Fantastic Four First Steps and Superman. We are this close to those two anticipated films coming out. I am so excited for both of them. Cannot wait. And speaking of both of those films coming out, we are waiting for Superman tickets to go online as of the recording of this podcast, but we just received news that the Fantastic Four First Steps have released their ticket sales for July 25th. That is the release date for the Fantastic Four First Steps. I have gotten my tickets. I got my tickets as soon as the news came out. And so actually I wasn't able to see, as I'm usually really early to the ticket sales, I wasn't able to see how many tickets had been sold already. It didn't look like my theater had filled up that much, but again, got them very, very early. So, just went along and thought, okay, we'll see how this goes. And then came some interesting news. And I think this is super fascinating in the context of box office. We talked last week about my predictions, my renewed predictions for box office in 2025, and how I'm upping my predictions for Superman, and I'm lowering my predictions for some other films, including Fantastic Four First Steps, which I still put above $600 million. And lo and behold, as these ticket sales have come in, Fantastic Four First Steps has broken a record. Now, I say broke a record, I don't mean all time or anything. I really, it's really just as simple as broke a record in 2025 thus far. It's only been, 5+ months of the year. So take this for what you will. But according to Fandango, one of the ticket selling websites for movies, Fantastic Four First Steps has become the number one first day ticket sales movie of the year. That means that on the first day of tickets going on sale, Fantastic Four First Steps has outpaced every other movie thus far. And you've seen it. I've seen, images and screenshots of people, and again, it's just anecdotal, but people showing how their theaters have filled up already and whatnot. And to me, this is surprising, not because I didn't believe Fantastic Four First Steps, didn't believe in the film to make a lot of money, but because of just the weird place that Marvel's in right now. Look, they just made a really good film. Thunderbolts has almost a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. It was beloved by a lot of people, myself included. I really like the film. And yet the film has barely been able to make over $300 million. It is not going to reach $400 million, which is really disappointing. It was a good movie. It was released in the prime early May release window where all the Avengers films have made over $1 billion, some even making over $2 billion. And Thunderbolts, has just kind of quietly, coming on. And I think it's disappointing. It's an indictment maybe on the marketing, because the marketing was not the greatest for this film, and also just Captain America: Brave New World. Because let's not have extreme recency bias. The film that came out in the MCU before Captain America: Brave New World was Deadpool and Wolverine. Now, you can argue Deadpool and Wolverine is sort of a separate thing, so maybe it didn't have much of a bearing on the results of Thunderbolts and Captain America. Fine, you can totally say that, but still, Deadpool and Wolverine made over $1 billion. So, it's not like all the MCU films recently are just completely tanking. Deadpool and Wolverine was liked, and it made over $1 billion. Captain America: Brave New World came out, and it was okay. It was received, fine by critics. Not great, not amazing, not terrible either. And it made about $400 million. And so then Thunderbolts was kind of teed up to kind of stumble out of the gates. And again, I think in marketing, I think they just didn't really know how to market the movie, to be quite honest with you. But they made a really good movie, and I stand by that. And so Fantastic Four, it was interesting because I was just thinking, what is this movie going to do box office-wise because of all these different factors? It could be really good in terms of box office, or it could also fall in that Thunderbolts range. And based on these early pre-sale tickets, and you have to look at this, it's outpacing movies that have made tons and tons of money this year. Granted, those movies, I think, made a lot of money for various factors. For example, a Minecraft movie, I think, just kind of became a meme. It went viral, and kids really wanted to go see it. That's fine. It made tons of money. Lilo and Stitch, I think positive word of mouth was what boosted that film up, as well as the Memorial Day weekend. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, I think, being the final film in that franchise and being pretty well received thus far, even though I wasn't a big fan of the movie, is also made a ton of money. And Fantastic Four First Steps is outpacing all those movies. Again, this isn't an indication not of general excitement, so I want to be very clear about that. This isn't saying Fantastic Four First Steps is automatically going to outgross all those movies. What it means is that the initial excitement is greater for Fantastic Four First Steps than it was for all of these other movies. Also, worth pointing out as well that this movie is coming out in the middle of July or towards the end of July, and that's prime summer season, so kids might be going out to see movies more and whatnot. So that has something to do with that, as school has just gotten out for most kids. But regardless, it's a really good sign. I am all of a sudden, again, I just made my renewed box office predictions for 2025, but I'm looking at that number, $600 million, and going, okay, maybe Fantastic Four First Steps has a shot to really really push past it. We'll see. I have a feeling that when Superman tickets go on sale, I think in a week or so, that it's going to break that record again, which is a good thing. Like when both franchises, both the MCU and the DCU are succeeding, it's a big win. And when we as fans are getting two great movies, regardless of what franchise they're a part of, both MCU, both DCU, both just any other franchise, it's a good thing in my opinion. So I'm excited. I think Fantastic Four First Steps might be primed for a big box office return. Guys, what do you think of these early projections and these early numbers? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys. Well, if Wicked Part 2, or Wicked for Good as it is now being called, if it ever wasn't one of my most anticipated movies of 2025, well, we have a first trailer for Wicked for Good. And look, I don't remember, quite honestly, I don't remember if this was my most anticipated movie of 2025. It probably was up there, but now it is. I mean, the rest of 2025. This trailer reminded me of every single reason why Wicked Part 1 was my favorite movie of 2024. First of all, and I have to admit up front, I'm one of the people who have not seen the stage play, the stage musical. I don't know what happens in Part 2 other than what I think, based on the trailer now, and also based on the allusions and some of the hints that were made and teases were made during the first part, Wicked Part 1. But I remember, I love movie musicals. I've said it before. Music is a cheat code. Music is a cheat code to a different side of us, an emotional side of us that cannot be unlocked otherwise. I think it's so unique and special in that way. And you combine that with storytelling, good storytelling, and all of a sudden you have just transcendence. And so I've always loved movie musicals for that. And on top of that, you have a movie musical that is as good as Wicked, as emotional. The music is amazing. Cynthia Erivo, Ariana Grande, just crushing it acting-wise, vocals-wise. It was the last 10 minutes of Wicked Part 1 with Defying Gravity. Just some of the best theater experience out of any theater experience I've ever had. It's so amazing to think back on it. And so Wicked Part 2, Wicked for Good, is coming out this November, this Thanksgiving season. And the first trailer has just arrived. And again, like I said earlier in the segment, it is everything that I could have ever imagined. There are moments just in trailers alone. Characters aren't even speaking. They're not even singing. There are just moments that got me a little bit emotional. And I don't know how it is. I think it's just that, I've grown so attached to some of these characters in this world and the memories that I have from this franchise, I don't know, but from the first movie are so ingrained, and it's just some of those little subtle things. For example, there are a couple things that stood out to me. One is more obvious, right? It's the scene at the end where they're singing For Good, and Elphaba and Glinda now hug, and you see the tear roll down Elphaba's cheek. That moment got me. It just reminded me of what we've been through with these characters thus far and what we're going to see with them. And it's going to be heartbreaking because we need to get to the point, obviously, at the beginning of Wicked Part 1 with the prologue of where Glinda is propagating the propaganda that that Elphaba is a wicked witch. And we need to get there. But before we do, we're going to go through a journey. And that brings me to the other moment that really gets, like, I've seen the trailer a couple times now. It gets me when I see the trailer. It's such a subtle moment. It's actually a moment we saw in Wicked Part 1 in sort of a flash forward kind of moment. And it's the scene where Elphaba and Glinda are just out in the field, I think. And Glinda just puts her head on Elphaba's shoulder. And it's such a subtle acting choice. And it feels crazy to say this for someone who is a pop singer like Ariana Grande. But she truly, she gave such a dynamic performance in Wicked Part 1 that I was out here saying, after having watched almost every single Oscar movie, that I still think she should have won Best Supporting Actress. That's how amazing I thought she was. And it's just this subtle way. If you watch the trailer again, it fades to black pretty quickly after, but just the way that she closes her eyes and leans on Elphaba's shoulder, and just this look of contentment that goes over her face. I don't know why, I don't know how, but those little moments, right, just remind me that this isn't your average movie musical. It's not even a good movie musical. This is a movie that the first part got nominated for Best Picture and won tons of Oscars, and I think deservedly so. And this second trailer, the music is amazing. I haven't heard these songs before. Again, I'm not somebody who watched the original. I don't know the soundtrack and whatnot. I'm excited to discover it again. I'm excited to join. And I'm sorry, maybe you guys who are musical theater people hate people like me who join the bandwagon once the movie comes out. I apologize. I am one of those people who join the bandwagon. But I'm so excited to do so because just based on the trailer, it looks like everything that you'd want out of Wicked. It looks like everything that you could ask for out of Wicked. And I don't know what the story is. It looks like we're getting a lot more incorporation of the Wizard of Oz story as well. I'm just so excited. The visuals look stunning. John Chu, I think this is going to be, even though part 1 was emotional, it was emotional, especially towards the end. I think that all the heavy hitting emotion and the emotional scenes are going to come in this movie in the second part. And I just cannot wait for it. So I watched the trailer and I loved it. And I cannot wait. Guys, what did you think of the first trailer for Wicked for Good? Are you excited about it? As excited as me, or maybe even more so, or maybe even less so? Let me know in the comments down below. And everybody, that will do it for episode number 81 of the Access Blockbusters Pod. Thank you so much for joining us as always. If you have not subscribed to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, road to 2,000 subscribers. It's a crazy number, but we're getting there. And I'm really happy and thankful and grateful to all of you guys who have joined since we've really started to redo the pod, or to restart the podcast in earnest last summer. It's almost coming up on a year since the weekly episodes have been coming out, which is awesome. So thank you guys so much for joining. Make sure to subscribe if you're listening on the audio-only platforms, or if you're interested. Again, podcast comes out first thing on the audio-only platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Overcast. Links are in the description as always, so make sure to check it out over there as well. And that will do it for episode number 81 of the Access Blockbusters Pod. I will see you guys in the next one.